In this episode, we turn our attention to auditing and safe administrative habits on Windows, because strong security is not only about preventing problems, but also about being able to see, explain, and respond when something goes wrong. Auditing is the discipline of recording meaningful security events so you can detect misuse, investigate incidents, and prove what happened. On Windows, this idea is often discussed in terms of telemetry, which is the collection of system signals about activity, behavior, and security-relevant events. Telemetry can include logs about sign-ins, privilege use, process creation, file access, and policy changes, and it becomes especially powerful when it is consistent across machines. We'll also talk about PowerShell, PowerShell, because it is one of the most important administrative tools in Windows, and because attackers also use it when they gain access. Safe use of PowerShell is therefore both a productivity practice and a security practice. The goal here is to understand what Windows can record, why certain signals matter, how to think about forensic readiness, and how to use powerful administrative tooling in a way that reduces risk. A strong beginner mental model is to treat auditing as the security camera system for a building. You do not want cameras everywhere with infinite recording because you will drown in footage, but you do want coverage at the entrances, in sensitive areas, and around critical control rooms. Windows auditing aims to capture events that matter most for understanding identity and control, such as authentication successes and failures, privilege escalation, changes to accounts and groups, and modifications to security policy. The value of these events is that they form a timeline, and timelines are how you move from suspicion to evidence. Beginners often expect a single log entry to prove compromise, but real investigations are usually about patterns and sequences. A single failed login is not necessarily meaningful, but repeated failures followed by a success at an odd hour is much more telling. Audit telemetry gives you the breadcrumbs to build that narrative, as long as you collect the right breadcrumbs and preserve them. Windows telemetry is broad, and it helps to categorize it into identity, system changes, and activity. Identity telemetry covers sign-ins, sign-out events, credential failures, account lockouts, and authentication method details. System change telemetry covers modifications to security policies, changes to local or domain group membership, creation of new accounts, and changes to services or scheduled behaviors. Activity telemetry covers process creation, script execution, network connections, and access to sensitive resources. This categorization matters because it guides your thinking when you suspect misuse. If you think an attacker is trying to gain entry, you start with identity telemetry. If you think an attacker is already inside and trying to gain power, you look at privilege and system change telemetry. If you think an attacker is executing actions on objectives, you look at process and activity telemetry. A beginner who can sort signals this way will be far more effective than someone who tries to read logs randomly. One of the most important parts of auditing is understanding why successful events can matter more than failed ones. Failed sign-ins tell you someone tried something, but successful sign-ins tell you someone got in, and that is where risk becomes immediate. Similarly, failed attempts to change policy may be noise, but successful policy changes can be devastating because they can weaken defenses or create persistence. Beginners sometimes focus on dramatic-looking errors, but attackers often aim for quiet success that blends into normal activity. A helpful habit is to ask, what would an attacker need to do to move forward, and which successful events would represent that progress? That might include a new administrative group membership, a new service installed, a suspicious scheduled task created, or a script executed by a privileged account. If you learn to identify those progress markers, you can use telemetry to detect misuse earlier and respond faster. Forensic readiness is the idea that you prepare your systems so that if something goes wrong, you will have what you need to investigate without scrambling. This is not only a technical idea, it is an operational habit. Technically, it means logging is enabled at useful levels. Logs are retained long enough to cover typical investigation windows, and time synchronization is consistent so events from different systems can be aligned. Operationally, it means you know where the logs are, you have procedures for preserving evidence, and you avoid practices that destroy or overwrite data. Beginners sometimes think forensics starts after an incident, but readiness starts before an incident. If logs are too minimal, or if retention is too short, you may never be able to prove what happened. A ready system is one where the default evidence trail is sufficient to answer common questions about identity, privilege, execution, and change. PowerShell enters this picture because it is both a legitimate administration framework and a common attack pathway. On the legitimate side, PowerShell is powerful because it allows administrators to automate tasks, manage systems consistently, and query system information efficiently. On the attacker side, PowerShell is attractive because it is built into many Windows environments and can be used to execute commands, gather information, and move laterally if credentials are available. This creates a security paradox. You do not want to ban PowerShell entirely because you need it, but you do want to manage it in a way that reduces misuse. The beginner takeaway is that safe tooling use is part of security posture. A powerful tool that is unmanaged becomes a weapon for whoever gains access. A powerful tool that is logged, constrained, and governed becomes an asset for defenders and a risky channel for attackers. To use PowerShell safely, start with the principle of least privilege and the habit of separating routine identity from administrative identity. The safest pattern is to do everyday work as a normal user and reserve administrative PowerShell use for specific tasks that require it. This reduces the chance that a malicious script or accidental command runs with maximum power. Another safe habit is to treat scripts as software, meaning you should know where they came from, what they do, and whether they have been altered. Beginners sometimes copy and paste commands from untrusted sources, which can be dangerous because it turns your administrative session into an execution engine for someone else's intent. Even if you do not fully understand a script, you should at least understand its purpose, its inputs, and its likely impact before running it with elevated privileges. This is not about paranoia. It is about respecting the power of the tool. Logging and visibility around PowerShell is a key part of the safe story, because what you cannot see, you cannot investigate. In a well-governed environment, PowerShell usage can generate telemetry that helps defenders distinguish normal administration from suspicious activity. For example, unusual script execution by a non-administrative user or a burst of PowerShell activity at odd hours can be an early warning sign. Another important idea is that attackers may try to blend in by using the same tools administrators use, which is why behavior patterns matter more than tool names. PowerShell is not inherently malicious, but it can be a signal when combined with other telemetry, like unusual authentication events or privilege changes. Beginners should get comfortable with the idea that tools are neutral and intent is revealed through context and sequence. Windows auditing also supports the idea of change tracking, which is essential for forensic readiness because many attacks involve modifying the environment. Attackers might create accounts, add themselves to groups, change policy, or alter services to persist. If you have strong telemetry around these changes, you can identify what was modified and when, which helps containment and recovery. For example, if a new account appears and then privileged actions follow, you have a clear pivot point to investigate. If policy settings change shortly before logging decreases, you may have evidence of defensive evasion. Beginners often think an attack is a single event, but many attacks are a chain of small changes. Auditing helps you see the chain and break it. It also helps you validate recovery, because after you remediate, you can confirm that the suspicious changes are reversed and that no new ones continue to appear. Another critical aspect of forensic readiness is protecting the integrity and availability of your logs and telemetry. If logs are stored only on the local machine and retained briefly, an attacker who gains local admin might delete them or wait for them to roll over. Better readiness often involves forwarding logs to a central collection point so evidence survives even if a host is compromised. The beginner concept here is simple. Keep copies of evidence somewhere attackers cannot easily erase. It is also important to maintain consistent time across systems, because a timeline that jumps around due to clock drift can create confusion and false conclusions. Even if you do not manage enterprise infrastructure yourself, you should understand that incident response depends on reliable timestamps and preserved records. Without those basics, even skilled analysts can be forced into speculation. By combining solid auditing with safe PowerShell habits, you build a Windows environment that is easier to defend and easier to investigate. Telemetry provides the narrative of identity, privilege, execution, and change, while safe administration reduces the chance that powerful tools become the attacker's easiest path. For a beginner studying for GSEC, the most valuable skill is the ability to reason about what you would want to know during an incident and to recognize which signals provide that knowledge. When you can categorize telemetry, focus on meaningful success events, and preserve evidence through good readiness practices, you move from reactive guessing to confident investigation. PowerShell then becomes an example of the broader lesson. Security is not only about blocking bad tools, but about governing powerful capabilities, logging their use, and building habits that keep administrative power deliberate, accountable, and visible.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.